A wealthy judge sentenced a single mom. Years later, her daughter appeared at his door with... The gavel came down with a sound that echoed through the courtroom like a death sentence, and in many ways it was. Judge Harrison Montgomery sat behind his elevated bench, his expression carved from stone, his tailored suit speaking of wealth and privilege that most people in that room would never know. Before him stood Elena Rodriguez, a 32-year-old single mother with trembling hands and tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, about to lose everything she had fought so desperately to protect. The charge was theft. $347 from the convenience store where she worked the night shift. The sentence was 18 months in state prison. No consideration for her 8-year-old daughter. No mercy for the desperation that had driven a good woman to make one terrible choice when her child lay sick and uninsured in their cramped apartment. Judge Montgomery had seen a criminal. He had not bothered to see a human being. If you believe in kindness and second chances, if you believe that every story deserves to be heard before judgment is passed, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that touch the heart and remind us of our shared humanity. Elena's world shattered that day in ways that the judge, sitting comfortably in his leather chair, could never have imagined. Her daughter, Maya, was placed in foster care while Elena served her time. The system that was supposed to protect children instead became another prison, shuffling Maya through 3 different homes in those 18 months, each one leaving deeper scars on her young soul. Elena emerged from prison to find that her apartment was gone, her few possessions sold or discarded, and her job prospects non-existent, with a criminal record following her name like a shadow. But worst of all, Maya barely recognized her when they were finally reunited. The bright-eyed little girl who used to run into her mother's arms had been replaced by a withdrawn child who flinched at sudden movements and refused to meet her eyes. Elena's heart broke in ways that no prison sentence could have prepared her for, and every piece of that brokenness could be traced back to one moment, when Judge Harrison Montgomery had chosen to see a crime instead of a desperate mother's love. The years that followed were a brutal testament to human resilience and a mother's unwavering devotion. Elena worked 3 jobs: cleaning offices before dawn, washing dishes in a diner during the day, and stocking shelves at a warehouse at night. She slept 4 hours if she was lucky, survived on coffee and determination, and poured every ounce of her remaining energy into rebuilding her relationship with Maya. She attended every school event that her exhausting schedule would allow, helped with homework in the narrow windows between shifts, and held her daughter through nightmares that neither of them could speak about. Slowly, painfully, Maya began to heal. The trust returned in fragments. A genuine smile here, a spontaneous hug there, whispered conversations in their tiny studio apartment that felt like prayers of gratitude. Elena never spoke bitterly about Judge Montgomery to her daughter, though his name was burned into her memory like a brand. Instead, she taught Maya about resilience, about rising after falling, about finding light even in the deepest darkness. She showed her daughter through lived example that circumstances do not define character, and that love can survive even the harshest judgments. Maya flourished despite everything working against her. She excelled in school with a fierce determination that mirrored her mother's, driven by dreams that seemed impossible given their circumstances. She volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends, understanding poverty from the inside in ways her more privileged classmates never could. She tutored younger students struggling with reading, remembering how education had been her own lifeline during those dark foster care days. Teachers noticed her exceptional compassion combined with brilliant academic performance, and scholarships began to materialize like answered prayers. Elena watched her daughter transform pain into purpose, and felt a pride so profound it sometimes made her weep with joy in the quiet hours of the morning before heading to her first job. Maya often spoke about becoming a lawyer, about helping people like her mother who fell through the cracks of a system that judged too quickly and listened too seldom. She wanted to be a voice for the voiceless, and Elena knew without doubt that her daughter would achieve everything she set her heart on achieving. 15 years after that devastating courtroom moment, Maya graduated from law school at the top of her class. Elena sat in the audience of the ceremony wearing a dress she had saved 6 months to purchase, tears of joy streaming down a face that showed every year of struggle but also radiated with unmistakable pride. Her daughter, her beautiful, brilliant, compassionate daughter, had not just survived, but had transformed her pain into a calling. Maya had secured a position at a prestigious law firm, but her real passion lay in pro bono work, representing defendants who could not afford adequate legal counsel. She took on cases that other lawyers dismissed as unwinnable, seeing in each desperate face an echo of her mother standing before a judge who had refused to see her humanity. And then came the evening when Maya arrived at her mother's apartment with an expression that Elena could not quite read. Part determination, part nervousness, part something else entirely. Maya explained that she had been researching one of her cases when she stumbled upon Judge Harrison Montgomery's name. He had retired 5 years earlier after a distinguished 30-year career on the bench, living comfortably in an upscale neighborhood on a generous pension. But Maya had discovered something else. A pattern throughout his career of harsh sentences for minor, poverty-driven crimes, a judicial philosophy that prioritized punishment over rehabilitation, that saw criminal behavior as character flaw, rather than often being symptom of systemic failure. Her mother's case was far from unique. It was merely one thread in a larger tapestry of lives disrupted, families separated, futures destroyed by sentences that never considered context or circumstance. Maya had obtained his home address. She wanted to visit him, not for revenge, but for something far more profound. She wanted him to see the aftermath of his judgment, to understand the real human cost of his decisions. Elena felt her stomach twist with anxiety, but she also felt something else, a strange sense of readiness, as if this moment had been waiting for them across all these difficult years. They drove together to Judge Montgomery's neighborhood, where manicured lawns and elegant houses spoke of a life insulated from the consequences of his courtroom decisions. Maya knocked on the door with a confidence that made Elena's heart swell with pride, even as anxiety churned in her chest. The man who answered was older, grayer, slightly stooped but still carrying an air of authority. His eyes flickered with confusion as they fell upon the two women on his doorstep, one young and professionally dressed, radiating quiet determination, and one whose face triggered something in his memory that he could not quite place. Maya introduced herself, explained that she was an attorney, and asked if they could speak with him for a few moments. Judge Montgomery, curious despite himself, invited them into his immaculate living room where photographs of his own children and grandchildren smiled from every surface. Maya spoke with a lawyer's precision and a daughter's passion. She laid out the facts of her mother's case from 15 years ago, watching recognition slowly dawn in the judge's eyes as he remembered. She described what had happened afterward, the foster care system, the trauma, the years of poverty and struggle, the destroyed relationship that had to be painstakingly rebuilt. She spoke without anger but with unflinching honesty, painting a picture of consequences that extended far beyond the 18-month sentence he had pronounced. Elena remained silent, watching the judge's face transform as understanding replaced his initial defensiveness. Maya then shared her own journey, law school, her commitment to representing people like her mother, her determination to bring compassion into a justice system often lacking in it. She explained that she had not come seeking an apology, though that would be meaningful. She had come to offer him something unexpected. From her briefcase, Maya pulled out a folder containing information about a non-profit organization she was founding, the Second Chance Legal Initiative. It would provide free legal representation and social support services to defendants charged with poverty-driven crimes, with a focus on keeping families together and connecting people with resources rather than simply warehousing them in prisons. She had come to ask Judge Montgomery to join the advisory board, to use his decades of judicial experience not to defend his past decisions, but to help create a better system going forward. She wanted him to meet the people behind the case numbers, to understand their stories before they made irreversible choices out of desperation. She believed that even judges who had caused harm could become agents of healing, if they chose accountability over defensiveness. The room fell silent as the weight of her offer settled over them. Elena watched the proud judge struggle with emotions that clearly overwhelmed him: shame, regret, and perhaps something like hope, that redemption might still be possible even at his age. Judge Montgomery's hands shook as he looked at Elena, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. His voice broke as he spoke, admitting that he had never followed up on cases after sentencing, had never considered himself responsible for the ripples his decisions created in people's lives. He confessed that retirement had brought uncomfortable time for reflection, that he had begun questioning decisions made with such certainty years ago. He said that Elena's face had haunted him even though he had not been able to place it until this moment, part of a growing gallery of faces that visited his conscience in quiet hours. With tears in his eyes, he offered the apology that no one had asked for but that everyone in that room needed. He thanked Maya for her extraordinary grace in offering him a chance to contribute to something better than he had built. He accepted her invitation, committing not only his expertise but also a substantial financial donation to help launch the initiative. It was not redemption. Nothing could erase the years of pain, but it was a beginning, a small step toward repairing some of what had been broken. As Elena and Maya drove away from that elegant house, mother and daughter held hands in a silence more eloquent than words. The story that had begun with a gavel's crushing blow had somehow transformed into something neither could have imagined. Not revenge, not even justice in the traditional sense, but something more powerful. It was grace emerging from trauma, purpose born from pain, and the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit to transform suffering into service. Maya's organization would go on to help hundreds of families, keeping parents and children together, addressing root causes rather than simply punishing symptoms. Judge Montgomery would spend his remaining years working alongside the very people he had once sentenced, learning their names and stories, becoming an unlikely but powerful advocate for judicial reform. And Elena, who had once stood trembling before a judge's bench, would eventually share her story at legal conferences and judicial training sessions, putting a human face on the statistics and case numbers that judges processed daily. Her daughter had appeared at that door carrying not bitterness but an invitation to healing, and in doing so had demonstrated that the most powerful response to judgment is not more judgment, but compassion, understanding, and the courage to build something better from the ashes of what was broken. The gavel had fallen years ago, but love had written a different ending than anyone could have predicted, one that reminded everyone involved that we are all more than the worst thing we have ever done, and that second chances are not just gifts we give to others, but the foundation upon which a more just and compassionate world must be built.